to charge more for your products and services than some other person or specifically your competitors. Today on Soapbox Wisdom, we're going to talk about a very important word, value. Only 5 letters, but a crucial topic for all of our businesses. I'm Barbara Menina.
And I'm Christine Rothdeutsch.
And welcome to this edition of Soapbox Wisdom. You know, the dictionary says, and I shall read, that the definition of value is a fair return in goods, services, or money for something exchanged. The amount of money something is worth. Christine, I think there's more to the story than that definition.
Well, yes, as we've talked about this in the past, Barbara, I was relating to you how for years I didn't get value and how to incorporate that into my own business until a couple of years ago from, I don't know, coach number 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know which, he was going over value. And all of a sudden the light bulb went on. Because again, a lot of coaches talk about value, increase your prices, you're worth more. And it eluded me until just a few years ago. And it's because with value, and I think this is something that came up in our conversations too, is it's not just a one-sided aspect. That when you talk about value, and that's what we're talking about today, where value starts and where it continues, and really where it starts is with ourselves. I think we're talking about that. But how do we value ourselves? And I think you would come up with some things we need to look at for, in respect to our own value. What were some of those things?
So first of all, mea culpa, I agree with you, took me a very long time to understand value. And it really does start with ourselves, especially when we're entrepreneurs and we think we're in this alone. How do we rate ourselves in terms of what is the value we're providing to our customers and what do we charge for that value? To me, there's certainly something about experience. If we've been at our craft for 25 years, we definitely have more experience and more wins than somebody who's in their first 5 years of business. So you have to look at experience. That is very definitely extremely important. You have to figure out how to convey that experience without being braggy. And you have to believe in what you're telling yourself. So once you really can itemize what you've done, what your wins were, you have to show that to people in your conveyance. You have to be able to express yourself in an energy that's all yours, that shows your authority, your credibility, your commitment. In other words, your value shows. You're not telling them, your value shows.
As you were saying that, Barbara, something came to mind that has never come up in any of our conversations, and this might even surprise you. When you're talking about your experience and value, it's the same thing as you're raising your kids. You're the adult. You've been there. You've done that. It's like you've got all that experience, even even if you're not a parent and you're dealing with people younger than you've had all that experience. Think of it the same way. You feel, hey, I've been there, I've done that. I've got that experience. I'm of more value. I know what I'm talking about here. So, oh my God, the light bulb went off again for me just as you were talking about that. I think we need to look at it that way also.
Well, I think that really goes to show that life is never far from business if there is any separation at all, especially for those of us that are in our own businesses. There's really this strong link. And by the way, a lot of lessons to be learned, because when you put it in terms of parenthood or teaching and talking to younger people, it really begins to crystallize. The key is internalizing your belief. You can't go into it and just say the words, just tell a story that shows what you've done. You've really got to believe it. You got to see it for yourself. And that's an important underscore.
Yeah, yeah. And it's important that we realize our own value, but it's not everything. I was reading through a thread, oh God, months ago in a Facebook group or something like that, and the people were talking about value, and alls they were concerned about is, yes, you are valuable, and your customers need to understand that. Nowhere in the conversation did it come in about what's the value on the other end. Say like you're charging $1,000 for your service or coach or whatever it is, but they're getting like $10,000 worth of value on there was nothing in the conversation about that. And that it really surprised me. I'm like, oh my goodness, these people aren't getting the whole picture when it comes to figuring out the value. Like I said in the beginning of this, it's not just a one-sided thing, just thinking about this part of your business. It covers a lot of areas. But that end value, and that's the one I really struggled with for years. I shouldn't say I struggled with it. I just didn't get it. And once I got it, I was like, oh, now I can see why I can charge more money.
Well, I think it's difficult uh, because it's hard to sort of make that end tangible. So you just said somebody is paying $1,000, let's say for a landing page and for an event they're having, and that event brings them in 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. It's hard to quantify the end. Actually, it's very hard to quantify, but it's absolutely imperative because just as you're saying, there are two sides to the equation, yourself and the customer. It's how you both perceive the value of a product or service. And at the end of the day, you both have to be on the same page in order for things to work out.
Well, and that's why it's important from, let's say, the seller's perspective and the buyer's perspective of really understanding what's gone into that product or service. And I know for us, Barbara, we're service providers. So we don't have a tangible product to say, okay, here's all the components that went into it. But we've spent years educating ourselves. And it saddens me that often people don't think about that. Especially with what I have been doing in the past with technical work of implementing for people. They're like, "Oh, well, you can do that in 15 minutes." True. But why is it that I can do it in 50? Because I've been learning all of this stuff over these years. I've paid money to learn these things. And I'm sure you come across the same thing.
You mentioned learning before, and I think that's such a vital point, because certainly we talk about experience, but the learning is a component of that, or a topic in itself. And I love the point. Like you, people will say to you, "Oh, you can do that in 15 minutes." I always joke that my friend said to me, "Barbara, you're a writer, and people think you go into a room, close the door, dim the lights, play music, and light a candle, and the words just come." Well, I'm here to tell you that writing is a process. There's the thought process. There's the first draft of getting it on paper. There's all the massaging and editing that comes after, before you even submit documents or content to a customer. And so people don't realize that, yes, it took an incredible amount of learning to get to a point where you even know that process, and that the
Mhm.
process isn't necessarily 1, 2, 3. It takes work,
Yeah,
time.
and I'm glad you said that, Barbara, about your process because I have to say, years ago, I was probably guilty of the thought of, "Oh, you're a writer and it comes easy to you." But yeah, it's such a wrong thinking. In order to get the quality that's needed, it takes time. Everything takes time. And this whole thing about, what goes into the product or service, I'll tell you, Barbara, for years, even before I got value, I would look at something, say it's, I'm out shopping or something, or especially with local artisans and whatnot. I would start thinking about what it took them to create that instead of just, oh, here's this tiny little thing and it's only worth $10. It's like, no, no, no. The supplies might have only cost $10, but again, the artisan's education and trial and error and all the time that they've put into that. Can I make something like that? No. So, eh, but it helps me when I'm looking at spending money, whether it's in my business or just personally, to think that way. Now, there are some areas that you can't. It's just not possible. I'm not gonna look at the eggs in the grocery store that cost $5 a dozen and say, "What did the chicken farmer put into it?" No, not But when we're talking about businesses like you and I, Barbara, and people that are local, that really put heart and soul and knowledge into what they're doing. And came to just now too. It's like, the plumbers. People look at that business and say, "Oh, it's only going to take you so long to fix it. Why should you charge this much money?" It's like, well, are you going to do it? Do
You
you
know,
know how to do it?
It's I it's such a good point, because essentially you're saying put yourself in the other person's
Mhm,
shoes. And I think
mhm,
that's really important, and something that's often overlooked in business. I mean, for years people have been using this expression, "Oh, it's just business." And I close my eyes
mhm,
and I see those words as a shoulder shrug of uncaring, when to me it's more than just business. And when you talk about putting yourself in other people's shoes, you are acting from a framework or perspective of more than just business. You're having empathy, you're having caring for the other person. It's very funny that you mentioned plumbers, because a few years ago, I had a client who was a plumber, and I was doing some coaching for him on being able to give a networking spiel, within
mhm.
45 to 60 seconds. And he was so flummoxed because he said to me, "I'm just a plumber. People know what I do." And I looked at him, and I chuckled and I said, "Just a plumber?" I said, "You're the world to a person whose hot water heater explodes on the day she's giving a party, or even worse, like happened to me, she's giving birth to her first child. You're the world, you're Superman to the person who dropped her diamond rings down the drain, and you come over right away and can retrieve them." So there are no justs. And
Mhm.
when you put yourself in the other person's shoes, you think about what they've had to go through, you begin to realize that. And by the way, that farmer with the $5 eggs, I
Mhm.
know we don't think of all that goes into his product and the raising of the chickens, but something else to think about in looking at life from his perspective: the cost of his goods and supplies,
Mhm.
the cost of transportation to get the eggs to market
Mhm.
has gone up.
Yeah.
So he has to, it's a domino effect. He
Well, just as a little side note here, though, I have to, I don't think the farmers are getting much of that fight. I don't want to get into political
Oh,
stuff,
all right.
but
Well,
I don't think the farmers are really getting much more for those eggs. It's like you say, all those parts in between, but that's a whole other
that's a whole
conversation
other
for us
subject.
to have. It's
But
like,
you know,
um,
there's so much, again, as we started out, that goes into the whole value discussion.
yeah, yeah, and talking about these little things happening in life and everything, Barbara, you told me a wonderful little story the other day when you were what, 12 years old, and how all of a sudden a light bulb went on for you at 12 years old. Do you want to share that story?
Yeah, that's it's rather random how that story even came into my head. I was talking with somebody about the Kentucky Derby, and it reminded me of the time I was 12, and my father had been transferred to London, which is actually an important part of this story. And I had friends in London, both British friends and American friends, kids my age, who were taking riding lessons. It seemed to be the thing to do. And you would ride in Hyde Park. So I wanted to take riding lessons too. And my mom went out with me and bought me the perfect riding outfit, the little hat, the perfect jacket, the joppers, the brown leather boots. It was a sight to behold on my little 12-year-old self. And I took riding lessons from a woman by the name of Miss Dixon at Dixon riding school in Kensington Mews. I mean, there was atmosphere all around, and she always gave me a horse named Biscuit to ride, and we would walk off and then start trotting in Hyde Park. And she taught me that you had to, with an English saddle, post, which meant you kind of went up and down as you were trotting. And so there we were every Saturday morning in Hyde Park. Clip clop, clip clop. Barbara is posting on Biscuit, and she loves it. But one Saturday, the dynamic changed, and Miss Dixon decided that she was going to include some more experienced riders, still kids, but more experienced riders in my class. And suddenly, not only were they in my class, but one of them got Biscuit, and I had to ride a smaller horse. And between you and me, I thought the saddle was too big, because I kept listing to the side, and I kept saying, Miss Dixon, the saddle is big and I'm going over, and she sort of poo-pooed me. So I just shut up, because back in those days I was kind of shy, and we were trotting along, literally posting, when suddenly the horses seemed to be going faster. And she had taken us up to a canter. And when you canter, you're not supposed to post. But I was still posting, and I like near flew out of the saddle, until I finally got smart. And in my little shy 12-year-old self, but in a very loud voice, I said, "Stop." And she did. And believe me when I tell you, she was annoyed at me. But in that moment, even subconsciously, I realized that we all have to speak out. And the customer is always right, or at the very least, the customer always has to be your first focus. And as I look back on that now, I think that was the groundwork for my career as a writer, because the next year I became editor of the middle school paper, and I went on to pursue that professionally after college. And so I think I knew even then that everybody has a story to tell, and there's a lesson. And this is what we have to do when we talk to our customers, to show them our value.
Mm. Exactly. Yeah, it's like you say, talk to our customers to show our value. Work with people like you, Barbara, to write content that shows our value, because we all can sit down and write something and we think, oh wow, this is wonderful. Yeah, but if it's not getting you clients, you're not conveying that message through there. So yeah, there's so much to starting to realize your own value, but then also conveying that value to your audience, to your prospective clients. Yeah.
You really have to be able to show, and I use that word all the time because it isn't really tell. It isn't tell at all. It's show your customer that they come first, because their number one question is, what's in it for me? So in that part of your business, in the brand and the marketing, I'm going to say that emotion makes a difference. But to your point, Christine, it's people like you who keep creatives like me on track, who help us with strategy, who help us think strategically, who help us make intelligent choices at the processes, systems, apps we need to make what we're doing work, which again shows that value in business comes from collaboration and people working together with different skill sets to form one powerful skill set in the middle.
Mhm. Well,
Collaboration is important to
yes.
value as well.
Yes, thank you for that, Barbara. Yeah, the value, when I work with clients, it's okay, where is this going to lead? What's the value on the other end? You can be busy every day, every minute and everything, but if the value isn't there in the actions that you're taking, what's the point? What's the point? Uh, I hope our listeners have taken away some good points here. We'd love to hear your comments, and if there's topics that you'd like to hear us cover in the future, please put them in the comments and let us know. We are here on Soapbox Wisdom every second and fourth Thursday of the month. And until next time, you have a great day.
That's right. Until next time, have a great day, a great week, a great weekend, and we'll see you in